If you recall from my last review on the game Elderborn, I got more coming, and I don't think it'll take as long as Tyranny would have. As it turns out, that might have been a bit of a lie. I contemplated doing an updated look at Ultrakill or Path of Exile Siege of the Atlas update or Arch Nemesis League. And while I do heavily, and I do mean heavily, recommend grabbing Ultrakill, the game is fantastic, I think it'd be more fair to do a full review of it once its 1.0 version is released. And as much as I love Path of Exile, also heavily recommended, surprise surprise, if I reviewed every single update or league that comes out, or for that matter, has come out in the past, I'll be here, well, forever. I'll of course be covering Path of Exile 2 when it gets out. Which brings me here, the Legendary Edition of Mass Effect, a game, or I guess technically games, produced by EA and developed by BioWare. Now, the first one's problematic, to say the least. I won't go into the specifics, but the short version is that they have something of a troubled history. BioWare, on the other hand, has a better reputation. They're responsible for such titles as Knights of the Old Republic, the Dragon Age series, and... oh look, I'm pinning the blame on EA for that. Originally, the first Mass Effect, the remaster for which I'm going to be reviewing in this video, came out in the far-off year of 2007, releasing on the Xbox 360, PS3, and Windows. This remaster came out in May 14 years later, and while I own the original both on Steam and on the 360, don't expect to compare and contrast for every little thing that differs between each iteration. Everyone already knows that the game looks better now, as shocking as that is, so I'm not digging into that well of, hey, look at this thing. I'll also be talking about the story, but I'll give you the standard spoiler warning before I get into the more in-depth stuff. You've been forewarned. Upon starting the game, you're met with character creation, which gives you a few choices to make. This fleshes out your character, granting them a specific backstory, an event that made them stand out in the Alliance, your character's class, and their appearance. Thankfully, in the remaster, FemShep's default appearance from 3 has been brought into 1 and 2, a big step up from what was there before. Also a fantastic addition, all classes can use all weapons, and the weapon sway on something like a sniper rifle has been greatly diminished from the original. Seriously, even as a soldier class, the only way to guarantee a stable sniper rifle was by sinking points into the sniper rifle talent, and equipping it with some modifiers that specifically affect it. Commander Shepard is an Alliance Marine on board the Normandy, a ship headed by one Captain Anderson on a presumed mission to see how the Normandy runs under certain conditions.
Spectres are trouble. I don't like having them on board. Call me paranoid.
You're paranoid. The Council helped fund this project. They have a right to send someone to keep an eye on their investment.
Yeah, that is the official story. But only an idiot believes the official story.
They don't send Spectres on shakedown runs.
As it turns out, that suspicion is accurate. Nihilus is on board to firstly help the Alliance with a Prothean beacon found on Eden Prime, and secondly to assess Shepard's capabilities and determine whether or not they're a good fit for the Council Spectres. Obviously, as this is a video game, things go wrong, and Shepard has to chase after a different Turian Spectre named Saren, the one behind the attack on Eden Prime. This is the premise for the game. Shepard chases Saren. There's some curveballs in its execution, but that's the bare minimum. I'll look at that more later, but for now let's begin with a relatively simple combat, which is almost entirely comprised of cover shooting. You point at things, and if you go pew enough, what you pointed at dies. There are also abilities tied to your class that can be used in combat. Most of these are situationally useful, forcing enemies out of cover or locking them in place so you have a second to breathe in the middle of a firefight. In fact, the basic cover shooter motif makes use of almost all of the skills you can spec into when leveling up. Those skills are determined by the class you choose at character creation, and there's two things I'd like to note about that. First, the Charm and Intimidate skills unlock more over time, with more points into your Paragon and Renegade stats respectively required to do so. These influence some of the choices you can make in the dialogue wheels present in conversations, so sinking points into them is a no-brainer.
This one only wishes to spread the truth to any who will listen. There is no intent to cause trouble.
Is this how the Enkindlers would want you to use this gift of consciousness?
The Enkindlers would wish for their message to be spread to all sentient races.
The Enkindlers wouldn't wish their message to be spread by breaking society's laws.
This one hears wisdom. Perhaps enthusiasm has clouded judgment in this matter.
Second, and this one is kind of annoying, the only way to guarantee getting all items in all chests at every instance said chests appear is to upgrade the electronics and decryption skills of Shepard, assuming that they have them anyway. Otherwise you'll need someone with you who does all the time. This is a point sink, inarguably. It's one of the most important stats if you're going for looting, behind maybe those all-encompassing Charm and Intimidate skills. The leveling here also has something of a caveat. On starting the game, you're presented with using either the Legendary mode or Classic mode. Apart from lowering the level cap to 30 and changing the amount of skill points you gain, Legendary mode also comes with some other changes to the game. Nothing so substantial as to change the story, however. I want the classic mode for the purposes of this review, so unfortunately if you're curious about the minutiae of the former, you may have to look elsewhere. The leveling also goes hand in hand with the inventory, as other than your dialogue choices, they're the only resources you have to technically manage, and the inventory management itself is... it could be better. You might notice, by the way, how I have a good amount of money. I've only just rescued Liara in terms of the story, if you're curious about where this recording lands in relation to that. Yeah, I haven't gotten far at all, and I garnered my riches by exploring everywhere I can. Money is pointless after a certain point. And the same can be said about Omnigel for the same reasons that I got the money in the first place. You'll likely spend a good chunk of your time here sorting through and equipping yourself and your 6 companions with the various bits of gear the enemies drop and that you can find in the game world. If you're as explorative as I am just to find everything the game has on offer, you'll likely be spending a lot of time in the Mako as well. Now, if you've played the game as it was originally released, remember that the Mako functioned like an actual shark would if it were thrown on land. Now in the remaster, the Mako generally speaking handles fine, certainly much better than the original at least. You may not be as bouncy, but damn, you still have to seriously work to get to where you want or need to go. Here I can see some flat ground on the mountain in the distance, and from where I'm standing there doesn't seem to be an obvious path to it. Gritting my teeth, I head on over, and once I get there, I see there isn't a path on the opposite side either. Here, have another one. There's something at the top of this plateau, and I search all around it. There's no clear path up, I have to go up again. Even when there's a clear path, the driving's still rocky. I don't know if the terrain was planned around the Mako's capabilities, but I'm glad it's not as bouncy as it used to be. Still a pain in the ass with how much you have to travel in it, though. Another issue with exploration is that despite visited locations being marked on world maps, the planets you've explored aren't marked on the galaxy map. That's something that you have to keep track of yourself. Given that both its sequel and the third have some means of keeping track of things in the galaxy map, it's a shame that there wasn't a change there from the original Mass Effect. Most of your exploring is meant to be the various side quests and missions, here called assignments, that you come across. Some of these you can find planet-side, some you get after being called by various characters while on board the Normandy and exploring the galaxy. Still others you get when directly talking to NPCs in the game. It's how you get the quest to find Banes, which you can, like myself, lock yourself out of if you don't ask a specific character about them when you have the chance. Another one, somewhat more interesting, is the quest regarding your biggest fan, Conrad Werner.
You're Commander Shepard, the hero of Eden Prime. I am so honored to meet you.
Let's talk about what I think the most annoying assignment is first.
Message coming in. Patching it through.
Normandy, this is Alliance Command. We're detecting your presence in the Attican Beta Cluster. One of our surveillance drones was gathering intel on Geth activities in the region when it was spotted and shot down. You need to go groundside and recover the drone's data module before the Geth find it.
A probe has landed on a planet, and you have to get to it. It's pretty simple, but here's the catch.
This is the surveillance drone, but where's the data module? Oh, this'll be fun.
Yeah. An alien monkey opened the probe and took the module. There are multiple monkey colonies, and you have to visit each and touch each individual monkey in those colonies to see if they have them. That is, unless you happen to watch some guy pretending to know what he's talking about while an in-game map is on screen with a big arrow pointing at where you might want to go to circumvent visiting all the colonies, but who does that? New players might not know where to go, so they have to travel to each individual colony and check each individual monkey. This is tedious. It's a shame that this planet also houses one of the most interesting pieces of lore tied to a separate side quest in the game. Though using the Mako to get to that is also annoying. Despite its obvious changes for the better, the Mako was unfortunately also the source, or at least the focus, of one of the 2 major bugs I'd found in my 30-ish hour playtime. One of those kinds of bugs that require either a restart or a reload of the game to fix. The other one occurred on Pharos. While technically not something that stopped me from playing the game, having Garrus and Liara stand to do nothing while I continue moving forward alone and pushing through the gap is still annoying. There's some minor ones too. Shepard's stomach problems whenever she crouches. This. And the last one's at least mildly entertaining, and he was the only character I came across in the entire game with this issue. There's one more immediately noticeable thing. Catch that? All of these glitches amount to simple immersion-breaking moments, but the major ones are more memorable as a result, which, honestly, I think that's a good thing. You don't want a slew of so many game-breaking bugs that you can't remember any that stand out after all. That'd be better if there were none to begin with, to be fair. Something else I noticed while playing as well, but I don't think it's a bug of any kind. An incredibly overused animation. Why? Moving on. Pun not intended. Some of the story missions, like the one taking place on Theorem, are somewhat forgettable barring one specific event or idea tied to them. Something else to note that's entirely unrelated is that there's a specific enemy that gets introduced in a similar way 3 separate times. I suppose that makes sense. There's no way that developers would have been able to guarantee which missions the player would take on first. So having it introduced on each one guarantees that the player is introduced to it and not confused when it shows up again for other missions where it's also introduced. It's weird. They could have just made the player have to go to Theorem first, or one of the others. Theorem just makes the most sense to me personally, and introduced it there and not have to do it multiple times. It's definitely a nitpick on my part. I just think it's an odd design choice. A nice touch is that after every story mission, you can go back to the Citadel and visit Counselor Udina and Captain Anderson to have an admittedly brief conversation about how the last story mission went.
Thank God the colony survived. We can't afford to have too many failures out in the Traverse. It's one of our major expansion regions.
You should also talk to... Ow. Christ. You should also talk to all of your companions between missions, though if you've talked with them enough, they won't really have anything else to add or say. That's how you end up with interactions like this.
Shepard.
Rex?
Kate and Ashley, the 2 human companions you have, are unfortunately not as interesting as the alien companions. It's a shame. It's not as if they don't have arguably important backstories, each with ties to important historical events in human history. Ashley's the granddaughter of General Williams, the first human to ever surrender to an alien. Caden was a human biotic during a time when biotics weren't understood that well, and was also a member of Brain Camp, as he calls it. Something I'm personally curious about is Ashley's faith. Take the Elcor, for example. Here's his faith explained.
Who are the Enkindlers?
Your people know them as the Protheans. They are the true creators of this one's people. The Enkindlers raised the Hanar from ignorance into consciousness by granting this one's people the gift of speech.
I genuinely want to learn more about how Ashley's faith, as well as both human and alien religions in general, function in a universe like this. Here's what Ashley has to say.
About it. I've met a few people who are really weirded out by my faith. Because I work in space, I can't believe in a higher power? Jeez. Hello, have you people looked out the window? How can you look at this galaxy and not believe in something?
This is another personal thing. It doesn't actually detract from the game, it's just something I'd be more interested in finding out about. Alright, I'm entering the dreaded spoiler territory, so head here if you don't want to hear about the story of a remastered game that originally came out around 15 years ago. Now that they're gone, let's talk about my favorite story mission in the game. Pharos is the name of the planet housing the human colony Zeus Hope, a colony that's recently been plagued by Geth. Apart from this part where you have to stay still, or you can't help the guy greeting you, you'd be forgiven for immediately assuming that this is your run-of-the-mill fight off the Geth and save people mission. I mean, technically it is, but shut up. Upon arriving in Zeus Hope, you notice a few things, beyond the usual supply issues one can expect when in a battle. Asking any of these civilians about the colony prompts them all to respond the same way.
It's hard to explain. It's kind of like... I can't describe it. You should speak with Fidan. He knows the colony better than me.
You should speak to Fidan. It's his responsibility. He knows the colony best.
I can't tell you much about that. You'd best ask Fidan if you really must know.
The colony is growing. Or it was. But you should speak with Fidan. He is our leader.
Why should I speak with Fidan? Why can't you tell me?
I don't want to talk about that right now. Speak with Fidan.
Some of the colonists are acting strange.
We're a close-knit group, Commander. Most of us have lost loved ones, friends.
These aren't trained soldiers. Nobody taught us how to deal with the horrors of war.
This is our home. We've watched the Geth slowly destroy everything that is important to us. Don't judge us too harshly.
I mean, I can't say how I'd react if a group of people I'd thus far been close to had suddenly died at the hands of what I can only describe as outer space machines, but literally every single person you ask having the same response? That doesn't make sense. As you complete some of the side quests and continue combating the Geth, you come across a colonist named Ian.
That was a good one. Very intense.
What's the matter with you?
Just invoking the Master's whip. Helps remind me I'm still alive.
Despite its strange colonists, you have to head out to the Exogeny facility eventually, since it seems to be the target of the Geth. Radio chatter along the way leads me to Juliana Bainham and Ethan Jean, were survivors of the assault on the facility. Juliana asked me to find her daughter Elizabeth, and into the facility we go. And she's not hard to find, in fact she finds you first.
so sorry. I thought you were Geth, or one of those Varen.
After her discovery and letting her know her mom is alive, she gives you an ID that eventually lets you learn that beneath Zeus Hope is Species 37, better known as the Thorian. As it turns out, the Thorian is a massive plant that releases spores that allow it to control its subjects through pain, and Exogenia allowed the colony to stay effectively on top of it to study its mind control effects. Lisbeth joins you on the Mako out, and you have to stop at the hiding place for the Exogenia employees from earlier. Ethan seems to be having a problem with the prospect of losing funding for the colony. And this ties to arguably the highest charm or intimidate check in the game, which is kind of ridiculous because this is still relatively early in it.
So you keep saying, but nobody's gonna miss a few colonists.
Can't you see the inherent potential in this colony? Think of the promotional opportunities.
Juliana has a suggestion for dealing with the infected colonists without killing them on your way to the Thorian.
I think you could safely use a nerve agent to neutralize the colonists.
Like a gas grenade.
Onward to Zeus Hope. And don't worry, if you're not good at tossing grenades or run out, there's another way. By the end, you see Phi Dan one more time and he shoots himself because he refuses to follow the Thorian's orders, which is ironic. If he'd actually followed the Thorian's orders, I would have just knocked him out, and he'd still be alive. As it turns out, the reason that the Geth have been attacking the colony to get to the Thorian was because Saren had gotten information from it gained via giving it an Asari named Shiala, and betrayed the Thorian to keep that information a secret. That information, if you're curious, was the cipher, something that can best be described by Shiala herself.
The cipher is the very essence of being a Prothean. It cannot be described or explained. It would be like describing color to a creature without eyes. To understand, you must have access to endemic ancestral memory, a viewpoint spanning thousands of Prothean generations. I sensed this ancestral memory, the cipher, when I melded with the Thorian. Our identities merged, our minds intertwined. Such knowledge cannot be taught. It simply exists.
The premise of an almost the Thing colony coupled with lore that could suggest that Shepard has access to effectively the memories of an entire civilization. There's even a security terminal you can find on Ilos, where it's discovered that Shepard actually understands the Prothean language as well. There's so much that can be explored as a result of this. Another interesting bit of potential is the following. On the Citadel is an Asari consort named Shaira, and completing her questline earns you a trinket that can be used at a special location on the planet Elitania in the Attican Beta Cluster. Yeah, the same location as that fucking monkey quest I mentioned earlier. Using this trinket here, at this beacon, shows you the following. Yeah, the Protheans were studying early humankind. Why? I don't know, but it'd be interesting to see it expanded on in the future. Despite the potential of these, there's something that I should talk about. The ending. Oh, but here's something I don't want you to miss before that. Before leaving for Ilos, we have to find a way to get the Normandy off of the Citadel since it's currently grounded. You talk to Anderson to figure out what to do, and part of the plan requires him to have access to Udina's computer.
Ambassador Udina issued the lockdown order. If I can hack into the computer in his office, maybe I can override it.
He will not just stand by while you use his computer.
Hopefully he won't be there. If he is, I'll just have to think of something.
After leaving Ilos through the conduit, you eventually find Saren at the Citadel Towers. In my case, through our conversation that also garnered the subtitle I've chosen for this video,
the relationship is symbiotic, organic and machine, intertwined, a union of flesh and steel. The strengths of both, the weaknesses of neither. I am a vision of the future, Shepard.
He shoots himself, and shortly afterward I'm presented with a choice. Normally speaking, I would choose to focus solely on Sovereign, but in this case I decided to save the Destiny Ascension. I was curious about how the ending would change as a result. I meet with the Citadel Council sometime after the successful destruction of Sovereign and defense of the Citadel. The Council views the fleet's defense of the Ascension as proof that humanity is ready to join the Council, to Udina's excitement. When asked who I would like to nominate, I decide on Captain Anderson to Udina's disappointment.
Do you support any particular candidate? We need someone with the courage to stand up for what he believes in. Someone like Captain Anderson.
Him? You must be joking. Anderson prefers to let his fists do the talking.
Only with you, Ambassador.
With this, Shepard declares that Reapers are still a threat and the game ends. The differences between this and choosing not to save the Ascension are somewhat negligible. The Council doesn't survive, and as a result, the Council ends up under the control of the Alliance. You can still nominate either Udina or Anderson to head, and you still leave with the idea that the Reapers are still coming, which, to be fair, they are. Every story mission ties directly into the one that follows, acting as a vehicle to get you to the final fight, and most of the choices you make prior don't really affect either that fight or the aftermath of the battle. Most of the choices don't have long-standing consequences in this game, keywords being in this game, which makes sense. The game had always been planned to be the first part of a trilogy.
Sovereign was only a vanguard. The Reaper fleet is still coming. Hundreds of ships, maybe thousands. And I'm gonna find some way to stop them.
The audio, most specifically the music, is well done. The orchestral songs tend to show up during specific important moments, such as this one, which occurs after becoming a Spectre and you take control of the Normandy.
This is Commander Shepard speaking. We have our orders. Find Saren before he finds the conduit. I won't lie to you, crew. This mission isn't going to be easy. For too long, our species has stood apart from the others. Now it's time for us to step up and do our part for the rest of the galaxy. Time to show them what humans are made of. Our enemy knows we're coming. When we go into the Traverse, Saren's followers will be waiting for us. But we'll be ready for them, too. Humanity needs to do this. Not just for our own sake, but for the sake of every other species in Citadel space. Saren must be stopped, and I promise you all, we will stop him.
Well said, Commander. Captain will be proud.
The Captain gave up everything so I could have this chance. We can't fail.
Yes, ma'am.
Which can also be unintentionally funny thanks to that cutoff. I find 3 to be my favorites, only one of which has the same scope as what I just showcased. The music you hear while in a bunker is probably my favorite in the game. Alongside the music that you hear when exploring the galaxy map. Unfortunately, the bunker music isn't necessarily unique. The first time I noticed it was dealing with biotic cultists, which fit perfectly, but it's in like every bunker. On planets, locations and their music are reused a good deal, with most changes being in the actual NPCs or enemies found therein. This affects the Bring Down the Sky DLC as well, though the furnishings in those buildings are distinctly their own. The story is more unique in terms of both environments and music, thankfully. Mass Effect is an interesting mixture of ideas with elements taken from both cover shooters and RPGs. His presentation immediately gives off silver screen vibes, especially given the film grain options. And lead writer Drew Karpyshyn, I really hope I'm pronouncing that correctly, who was also the lead writer for Knights of the Old Republic, made the characters memorable. Apparently there's something close to 20,000 lines of spoken dialogue. A lot of effort went into this, and it shows with a 3-year development time and 130 people involved in its creation. This wasn't a small project. All in all, it's a good game, not the best in the series, but a good beginning to a renowned trilogy. I'm sorry about the wait. I had something close to 300 gigabytes of footage, and I didn't end up using most of it. That's on me, though. I'll be doing ME2 at some point in the future as well, just maybe not immediately. For now, thanks for watching. Feel free to like, subscribe, all the stuff YouTube would like me to mention. Till next time, story out.